Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Alien Talk with your hosts, Erica and Nathan. Today's date is February 13th, 2011. Hi, Nate.
Hi. How are you doing?
Our guest used to run the British government's UFO project at the Ministry of Defense. He's an author, a journalist. He is considered one of the world's leading experts of UFOs and has quite an impressive resume. His name is Nick Pope, and he is already with us today. Welcome, Nick. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's good to be on.
Thank you. So it's 8 o'clock there, and so you get up bright and early, I see. It's 2 a.m. here, but we're always up, always doing this. So it's I would really like to kind of get into, if there's anything you wanted, if the introduction, if you wanted to elaborate on that, or would we like to go into sort of a recent news? And because I know you were just kind of doing something with the Global Competitiveness Forum, and just whatever direction you want to go in.
Well, let's start with that one, because I think it is a big story, and it's a story that's been getting quite a lot of coverage in the UFO community on various blogs and forums and such like. But it's a story that has not necessarily been entirely accurately portrayed. I think a number of people have misunderstood what the Global Competitiveness Forum is all about. So let me start by really setting the record straight and bringing you up to date on that. The Global Competitiveness Forum is essentially a sort of Arab world equivalent of the World Economic Forum at Davos, and it's hosted by SAGIA, which is the Saudi Arabian General Investment Authority. It's in its 5th year now. The event takes place in the Saudi capital, Riyadh, and it's effectively a government-sponsored event. And what the event is really all about is about the business community. It's about bringing new money to Saudi Arabia, but also about forging links between various Saudi business people and the Western world. And one of the panel discussions at this session was called Contact: Learning from Outer Space, and the guests on that panel included an Islamic scholar, Michio Kaku, the theoretical physicist who does a lot of work at the Large Hadron Collider and who we see on television a lot of times, Jacques Vallée, Stanton Friedman, and myself. And what we really did is we all had somewhere between 5 and 7 minutes to make a position statement, and then the moderator would ask perhaps a couple of follow-up comments, and then we threw it open for a Q&A at the end. And as you can imagine, a lot of people said, "My goodness, there's a UFO conference in Saudi Arabia, right. or there's a conference where UFOs were discussed," but it was a little more complex than that.
Okay.
Again, just to put some flesh on the bones, whilst people like Stanton Friedman and Jacques Vallée did talk about UFOs, I used my time to say that effectively we're in a new space race, as I put it. We're in a situation now where a lot of different people are looking for extraterrestrial life, but in different places and with different methodologies. The UFO community, of course, is continuing its own work on this question. but we find the radio astronomy community using telescopes to listen for a signal, the SETI program. We find various people in the world of astrobiology looking for extrasolar planets, talking about doing spectral analysis of the atmosphere, looking for the biomarkers, as it were, the biological signature that we think life would give. And we've also got, of course, the prospect, even within our own solar system, of either robotic or manned missions to Mars or perhaps Europa, and the possibility, the very real possibility, of finding microbial life there. So I talked about this as being a new space race, and the theme of the Global Competitiveness Forum was all about innovation and competitiveness. And my point was, this race, this can teach the business community something about thinking outside the box, innovative thinking. So that's where I was coming from, and I think that is what the organisers were really interested in hearing about. So, yes, we had this discussion, but it wasn't quite the UFO festival, as it were, that's been portrayed somewhere. And neither I think does it imply in any way that the Saudi government or the business community is somehow aware of some great truth and are trying to position themselves or prepare themselves on this question.
Okay, well said.
Yeah. But always to be, for the most part, aware of any potential. I mean, it's good to be aware of anything that could ever affect the world. So yes, that's definitely good to have something in place.
Yes, it's what the business community would call low probability, high impact. In other words, even if you're skeptical about this, if it does turn out to be true, even once, the world will change forever. So you had better be ready for it. And again, just to put a little bit more flesh on the bones for you in terms of the level of this conference, just to give you a feel for the sorts of people that were there, without wanting to sound too elitist, but I mean, self-evidently it was. Tickets to this event were $5,000, nor, if you had $5,000, could you just walk in. It was limited to people in the business community at board level and at chief executive officer level. The sorts of people speaking included Saudi government ministers and senior business people, again at board and CEO level, from companies such as Google, Volkswagen, Boeing, Rolls-Royce, PricewaterhouseCoopers. So, some real heavy. The keynote speaker was Bill Clinton, and Tony Blair was on another of the panel discussions. So this really was royals, senior business people, political figures, and we were advised, it's just quite an amusing story. It's the only conference, it's the only invitation I've ever received where I've had to respond with the greeting, Your Excellency, thank you for your kind invitation to speak at the conference. And indeed, in the guidance that all speakers were sent before this, we were advised to preface our remarks with the greeting, Your Royal Highnesses, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests.
Wow.
Wow, that's very impressive. Yes. Wow, that's very impressive. That's pretty much all I can say on that. That is. But yeah, that was a good meeting, I'm sure, and it was a much necessary, like you said, just to make sure it would have severe impact on the world if there was some things going down.
Yes.
I did have a question about that, Mr. Pope. You mentioned that it would change our world, and that was actually one of our questions. What types of ways do you think that it would change our planet?
Well, that's a really interesting and complicated question. I think, funnily enough, some of the ways in which we think it would change the world, maybe it wouldn't. And I'll give you a very good example of that, is actually religion. And this is something that came up. And again, last year, I was fortunate enough to attend 2 Royal Society discussion meetings talking about the possibility of extraterrestrial life. The first one was called, sorry, I'm having a momentary lapse of memory here. It was called The Detection of Extraterrestrial Life and the Consequences for Science and Society. And then they had a follow-up meeting which was entitled Towards a Societal Agenda on Extraterrestrial Life. Now, one of the issues that came up was religion. And people have this idea that it would somehow undermine people's religious beliefs and shatter their faith. There's actually been some work done by this, done on this by Ted Peters, who's a theologian, and he actually found that almost certainly wasn't the case. What he found was that people said, no, it wouldn't shatter my religious beliefs. It wouldn't destroy my faith. Actually, it would probably strengthen it. And when he followed up his opinion polls and said, well, why do you say that? The answer that he got back most times was along the lines of, well, if we discovered that it wasn't just us and that the universe was full of life, well, it would make God's creation seem even more expansive and wonderful, wouldn't it? So actually sometimes these issues can be counterintuitive because it's easy to bandy around these sound bites about alien life. Oh, it would shatter our religious beliefs. When you actually ask the question, go and talk to people who are religious and who have thought about this issue, they'll tell you a different story. So sometimes, yes, the world will change, but perhaps not always in the way that we think.
Absolutely, I agree. Yes, Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to.
Go ahead.
I would see the vastness of, say, God's, creation, for example, as being, that's absolutely, it really would. I would think almost bring us, although far and wide, it would bring us even closer somehow because, of course, then the mentioning, the Vatican mentioning, for example. Just even bringing in the fact that they're mentioning extraterrestrials as, one of, as they say, God's, as a possibility in God's creation, So it's just the mere fact that it's on the table right now versus, years ago they didn't say that. So to me, I see, as disclosure comes more and more, or perhaps we're in it, I say we're almost in it like right now, but okay.
Well, Mr. Pope,
I don't know about that. Let me just make one other point about that because it's something you touched on in your remarks there about bringing us closer. One of the things that I think might happen, and this is with my idealistic hat on here, but why not? One of the consequences that discovering extraterrestrial life might have is actually bringing us as people closer together. And what I mean by that is that if we discover extraterrestrial life, and particularly if we discover lots of it, supposing we find out that the universe is teeming with life and a lot of it is intelligent, there are other civilizations out there, we might come to regard ourselves in a less narrow fashion. In other words, we wouldn't primarily perhaps think of ourselves as American as opposed to Russian or Chinese, or Christian as opposed to Muslim or Jewish, or black as opposed to white, this as opposed to that. Perhaps, and I profoundly hope this is what happens, perhaps we will come to regard ourselves less in those terms and more in terms of I am a citizen of planet Earth. And if I can borrow a quote from your president, perhaps we would find that there is far more that binds us together than sets us apart.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well,
yeah, I hope so too.
So I guess I guess we're kind of. Well, for the recent news, I just have to go. I'm a 1, 2, 3 down the line kind of a person, and I had this on the list, and it was just something. Have you been, recalling that there's been a lot of bird deaths and animal deaths all over the world? Is there any theories that you've heard that seem that they might just, because there's a pole shifting, and you know how people are kind of making speculations with 2012, and I know that I want to get back into the disclosure kind of portion of it, but there was just something that for the recent news has kind of been happening. And
yes, I've seen those reports. I've seen various theories which range from pole shift and even chemtrails through to other theories about viruses and such like, and other theories, other more skeptical theories, just saying, at any given time, for all sorts of reasons, and one of the reasons that I've heard is even hailstorms, and we've seen that people can be killed by hailstones tragically on 1 or 2 occasions. It's certainly if a flock of birds goes through a high altitude hailstorm, for example. That can kill an awful lot of them very suddenly, and I suspect that at any given time, for all sorts of reasons, some of it will be poison. We've seen mass fish deaths, of course. Sometimes it'll be poison, sometimes it will be, I don't know, thunder and lightning, whatever. At any time, there are probably a lot of animal deaths. But what we tend to do, I think now we're in a mass media society, now we're in a 24/7 media society. Sometimes when a story like this breaks, it's easier to connect the dots with other stories. And I'm pretty sure this sort of thing has always gone on, but it may just be that it's more noticeable in our 24/7 multimedia society. But I don't. To answer your question, I don't have any particular one theory that I think lies at the bottom of these unfortunate deaths.
Okay, yeah, because I just recently had heard, and of course I can't think of, I would love to be able to say where I heard it, the exact person, but for the most part, and even with the pole shifting would be, if I'm not mistaken, the North Pole is shifting 25 miles towards Russia every year.
Yes, the magnetic North Pole does migrate, and there is certainly evidence that many times in Earth's history it has actually suddenly flipped completely on sort of north-south. And there are many different theories about what this will mean, and some people are tying this into almost the apocalyptic idea that it will bring about the end of the world. I don't think there's any geological evidence to suggest that it would have that effect. I think the honest answer from the world of science is that if this does happen very rapidly, as history, the geological record shows that it has, we don't really know what, if any, effect it will have. It may have virtually no effect at all. I'm sure it will affect things like migration of birds and things, start going the wrong way. But there's that old phrase, isn't there, which I think comes up in Jurassic Park of all places: life will find a way. And I'm sure we'll adapt to this. And I go back to the point that although this has been linked with 2012 and Mayan end time prophecy, there's no evidence at all to support that. So even if the pole does suddenly shift, very shortly, within our lifetimes, as it well might, I don't think there's any need for alarm.
I agree. Yeah, and that could explain some of the birds and the animals. Just with in general, any kind of shifting
changes.
or just disruption, with the Earth. So, I mean, that's always a
I'd
possibility.
like to ask a question here. I don't mean to detour from this conversation, but I'd like to talk a little about the concern with our the UFOs deactivating our nuclear missiles. And I was wanting to ask you, I don't know if you are able to answer this or not, Mr. Pope, but would you consider that when extraterrestrials deactivate these missiles that it's a concern for humanity and themselves, or do certain officials consider it a terrorist issue? Are they showing signs of concern about our nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction?
Well, obviously with my government background, there's a limited amount that I can say about specific incidents.
Right.
But I mean, in general, I can say, obviously I'm well aware, and a lot of it's in the literature, of some incidents where it's alleged that this has happened. And really, all I can do is give you my kind of generic answer on this, which is that from a government point of view and from a military point of view, if anything interferes with nuclear weapons, whatever the motives, and I think the point is that we wouldn't know or couldn't be sure. That is a security issue. The basic point is it's a security issue. And initially, of course, I think in government, in the military, there is this tendency, and I think it's correct, actually, to fear the worst and to prepare for the worst. In other words, if something is interfering with nuclear weapons, I mean, ultimately, the biggest concern is somebody trying to detonate this weapon?
Right. Yeah.
Now, that may not be the case, but it's prudent. Yeah, it's prudent to think the worst and to try and prepare for it and guard against it, than kind of go through life with this, everything's going to be fine, and I'm sure this is nothing to worry about mindset.
Right.
Now, as to what, I mean, if these incidents are true, and if this was extraterrestrials, and I don't know that it is, I don't know that it isn't, but if it were, of course we can speculate that, it might be high-minded, it might be motivated by, just them trying to ensure that if we did ever get to the crazy point of trying to initiate a third world war with nuclear weapons, maybe, maybe they're, trying to make sure that they've got a handle on that and could stop us by deactivating those weapons. And that's certainly what a lot of people in the UFO community believe. But the only thing that I would say is, well, that is just a theory. And I think it's very dangerous sometimes we take a very anthropocentric view, I think, of extraterrestrial life. And we start sometimes thinking, well, what would we do? And all the time when we talk about extraterrestrials and we start theorizing, it's always about ourselves. We always put ourselves at the center of this. And we start thinking, well, the aliens would be doing this because of X or because of Y, and we always tie it to ourselves. Oh, they're stopping us blowing ourselves up. They're guardians of the human race. And well, maybe they're not remotely interested, but I think, as I say, it's dangerous sometimes to start this very anthropocentric theorizing where everything is about us.
Right, that's true. Well, do you think that there are extraterrestrials, or in theory, maybe here on Earth interacting amongst us, perhaps? I've heard, the theories on it.
I don't know. I mean,
I know it's out there, but
yeah. Let me actually. That's a pretty good time for me to maybe set out my personal beliefs more generally. I am absolutely convinced that there is life out there in the universe. The laws of physics and chemistry seem to be and should be constant throughout the universe, so the factors that gave rise to life here should happen numerous times out in the cosmos. And also, I'm convinced there's intelligent life out there as well. I see no reason why microbial life should be the norm. We've only got one model, which is our own, but it seems that life progresses and evolves and mutates, and that's a sort of an arrow, as it were, the arrow of time. But life doesn't just stay static, and in evolutionary terms, in survival terms, the interesting point is that intelligence seems to be a pretty good survival strategy. So again, if life arises elsewhere in the universe, there would seem to be a reasonably logical case for saying that some of that life should be intelligent life, because that's a good strategy. So life out there, intelligent life out there, definitely. Are we being visited? Do they live among us? I don't know. I think there's some intriguing evidence, but there's nothing that I would absolutely say is take it to the bank definitive proof that would be accepted by the mainstream scientific community. And let's not, I think that's a very important point, let's not kid ourselves that we only need to prove this to ourselves. I mean, I think all too often the UFO community is guilty of preaching to the choir. It's no good convincing other UFO researchers, that we've got some absolutely proof positive of this. What we've got to do, what the UFO community has got to do, is convince the mainstream scientific community. And when we see this on the front page of Nature or Scientific American, and when AAAS endorsed this, that's when it's case closed for extraterrestrial life, but not until.
Okay, yeah. What about, do you have thoughts, personal thoughts, or on alien abductions? Very touchy, controversial subject, but, rather maybe in reading some of the archived reports, perhaps, or something. Is there, theories or, I've had a personal encounter, but as far as, just kind of understanding where you and maybe even some other people, stand on that, I guess, in general?
Yes. When I was investigating UFO sightings for the Ministry of Defense, the alien abduction...
Hello? I don't know.
Okay. Can you guys hear me? Okay, we lost Nick. I'm going to go ahead and give him a call back. So let me stick some quick music on. Please just hold up, okay? Nate, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Nate.
I just called in.
My phone was dead. I'm going to give him a call while I'm playing some music. Okay, hello. We're on the air. Nick, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and Nathan,
We
are
apologize.
you there?
Yes, I'm
really,
here.
Guys, long story short, technical difficulties. And so where we were was right when you were getting ready to say your personal, it had to do with alien abductions and sort of reasons and understanding. I wonder if I could ask you to somehow try to remember where we were at.
Sure. Well, yes. I was just saying that during my time on the Ministry of Defence's UFO project, alien abductions were not formally in my terms of reference, but self-evidently because of the perceived connection between the two mysteries, I couldn't help but get drawn into the debate, as indeed I got drawn into debate about, for example, crop circles, but that's another story. But yes, so I received some alien abduction reports whilst I was working for the Ministry of Defence, and there were some in the archives that my predecessors had encountered, and indeed after I left that particular job, there were some other reports, and of course the Ministry of Defence is in the process of declassifying and releasing its archive of UFO files. So some of this material
Wonderful.
is now being published, though I should hasten to add to, obviously the Ministry of Defence respects people's witness confidentiality and details, personal details, names and addresses, personal information of abductees is blacked out in these files, just as the personal details of UFO witnesses is blacked out as well.
Right.
So whilst this is frustrating for some researchers and media people, obviously it's the Ministry of Defence honouring its legal commitment. I mean, this is enshrined. This isn't just witness confidentiality. Obviously, it's the law. It's the Data Protection Act and people's right to privacy. So that's an important point. To go back to the central issue of what do I think about these reports, it's an odd situation. I can tell you what it isn't, but I can't tell you what it is. Let me explain. What I mean is that having met, I guess, probably now around about 100 people who claim to have had these sorts of experiences, having read, obviously, widely in the literature about this, and having looked, interestingly, at some of the skeptical studies of all of this, I'm convinced of two things. Firstly, these people aren't mad. I mean, I think it's very easy sometimes to create a very stereotypical view of an alien abduction scenario and for this to be ridiculed. But in my experience, and interestingly, even in the experience of the skeptics, there is no evidence of psychopathology in the abductees, and there have been a couple of scientific studies where abductees have been given the standard array of personality tests and other psychological screenings. And as I say, the headline result is that when compared to a control group of non-abductees, and there have been a couple of proper scientific studies where these have been double-blind experiments with control groups, etc., all the rigorous protocols you would expect. As I say, the main conclusion has been that these people have no mental illness, no personality disorder, nothing like that. They are, to slightly mangle a phrase from the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, these are ordinary people in extraordinary situations. The second point I would make is this: these people aren't lying, and they're not attention seekers. And I can demonstrate that by two reasons. One scientific, one not. The unscientific way to demonstrate that these people aren't attention seekers is simply anecdotal. But it's to say that in the, 100 or so people that I've come across, whose details I've got, who have had these sorts of experiences, obviously I do a lot of work with the media. I do a lot of work developing programs for networks and for production companies. And quite a lot of those shows have touched on the issue of alien abduction. So a question that I'm often asked by TV producers is, "Oh, Nick, can you get some abductees to come onto this show?" Whether it's a documentary, whether it's a chat show, whatever. And of the 100 or so people that I've, say, got details of, I can think of maybe 3 or 4 who want anything to do with the media. And this is even in situations where, people are being promised anonymity, promised an appearance fee. So these people are turning down the money, they're turning down the attention, and again, it's not scientific, but I think it's actually quite interesting from an anecdotal point of view that it's an interesting way of illustrating that these people are not attention seekers. The other interesting point is that even a couple of the best-known skeptics in this field, and I'm talking about Clancy and McNally, who've done a couple of scientific studies on this, they did a very interesting double-blind experiment where they took some abductees and they got them to relay their experiences. And then they got a control group of non-abductees to recount a sort of traumatic scenario and imagine that it happened to them. What they found, interestingly, was that the abductees showed physiological symptoms such as increased heart rate and perspiration when they were recounting their experiences. So even though Clancy and McNally are skeptics, and they didn't literally believe that these people had been physically on a spaceship, but the interesting point was they said clearly they think they have been. They're not lying about this. If they were, you wouldn't get this physiological response that you don't get with the non-abductees. And that was incredibly interesting. And that's why at the beginning of this answer I said I can tell you what it isn't, but I can't tell you what it is. It's not, like I say, it's not madness, it's not attention seeking, it's not people just telling lies. It's something else. Something's going on. What it is, I don't know.
Okay,
wow.
Well that's
amazing.
A good answer, because I know what you're saying. It's really hard to. You're trying to bring as much credibility to this subject, and there's only so much you can say, and also only so much proof. It is hard to get the good proof, obviously, or we would have. Even though there's videos out there, and especially some of them, are pretty obviously, computerized and fake, there's still some that pose good questions. Like, I have to bring up that recent Jerusalem UFO sighting, and, have you seen that?
Yes, there are, as I understand, at the latest count, there are 4 separate videos. The third one, I think, was fairly quickly assessed as being fraudulent, and some people said maybe to discredit the other ones. I don't know. I'm afraid on this one the consensus now does seem to be swinging around to the whole thing just being a fairly well-coordinated fake. But when I used to work at the Ministry of Defence, obviously I had access to all sorts of technical experts who could analyze and enhance imagery, whether it was photographs or videos, and I could get a proper scientific, technical analysis done. Now, unfortunately, of course, now I've left government, I'm in the same boat as everyone else, really, and I really, just can't do anything other than look at these things and say what I think. It's interesting, but I'm afraid.
I'm still, although Nathan and I both talk about how we've had sightings, we've had experiences, we're still initially skeptic because we don't want to be foolish and just make something out of nothing, because there's hoaxes now are easier than ever with technology. I mean, let's face it, the internet and all the stuff that you can Photoshop, and so it's always
absolutely.
Yeah.
A 14-year-old kid in his or her bedroom can get some program, put something up on YouTube, and it will go viral and go around the world. And actually, with young people today, and maybe with not so young people sometimes, the temptation to do something like that, I mean, it's a kind of new sort of fame, really, to create a video that goes viral. And obviously, the UFO phenomenon lends itself to this. And unfortunately, we're in a situation where, in evidential terms, just saying that a YouTube video on UFOs looks interesting and has several 100,000 hits, well, yeah, great, but that doesn't really take us much further forward. What is interesting is almost more the follow-up stories. For example, I had an email 2 or 3 days ago from a woman from Wales, I think, and she simply said, well, I don't know one way or the other about this Jerusalem video. She said, but what I can tell you is that sort of speed and maneuver, it's exactly what I saw 20 years ago, and she relayed to me a fascinating account. So sometimes videos like this serve a wider purpose in raising awareness and in encouraging other people with interesting sightings to speak out. But unfortunately, the UFO mystery is not going to be resolved by something going on YouTube.
Right. Well,
True.
I agree with the speed to which I believe the original one, the most believable one, definitely, definitely looked close to what I can remember. But at the same time, yeah. Nate, did you have some other questions?
Yeah, I'd like to speak more on disclosure. Do you think that, of course, like you said, it's a closer world because of the media and the internet, but, do you think disclosure is getting closer, and will it be a televised event, or will it come mainly from ETs themselves, or is that what's happening now? I know that's a lot of questions in one, but are you at liberty to speak on that?
Well, again, my honest answer to this is I don't know. And in fact, I'd back up the question a little bit and say that, I'm not trying to be flippant about this, but the first point is it depends what you think there is out there to be disclosed. I mean, there are a lot of people there are a lot of people in the UFO community who absolutely believe that the extraterrestrial presence is real, and that government at some level knows all about this, has all the facts, has some hardware, and is in a position, if it chooses one day, to throw aside the curtains and say, here it is. Well, that actually might not be the case. I mean, I know a lot of people will disagree with me on this, but it may be that the government doesn't know all the facts and doesn't have hardware and isn't able to go, ladies and gentlemen, we're not alone. That might be the case, but it might not. So, in a sense, I can't answer your question because I don't know what there is to disclose, and if there is a definitive article somewhere, I don't know who's in control of that and who can make the decision. What I can say is that in a purely scientific, sort of sense, we are clearly getting closer, I believe, to a situation where we will discover evidence of extraterrestrial life. And I touched on this at the beginning of the show. It might come through microbial life on Mars or Europa. It might come through the SETI project, picking up a signal. It might come through astronomers detecting a biological signature of life around an extrasolar planet. And let's just consider, a few years ago, we didn't even have any evidence that there were any other planetary systems around other stars. It was just speculation. Now I think we're well over 500. Yeah, we're over 500 extrasolar planets now. And of course the technology is such that it's easier for us to detect the big planets because they're bigger and easier to find. We are narrowing down the search for shadow Earths. And, that day may come very quickly. So disclosure may take many forms. It may well be. It may well be that someone in government does know this is real and has evidence, and maybe tomorrow the president will go on TV and say so. I think it's more likely that the first time we'll get definitive proof of this, it will come through a more scientific discovery. But who knows? I think one of the interesting things about disclosure is let's suppose for a moment that the president did go on TV and say, my fellow Americans, people of the world, Roswell happened, we got a craft, aliens are here, something like that. I mean, slightly glib, but that's what a lot of people in the UFO community almost sort of believe will happen and hope will happen. I think one of the problems with that is that the unsaid message will then be, and every single government that you've had for the last 60 years has lied to you about this issue. So if there is something to disclose, there are some big problems and big issues about how to unpack that truth. And I know that people like Richard Dolan and Bruce Zabel, I think, have addressed some of these issues in their book, haven't they, after disclosure? And a lot of people have speculated on this, but I think there are some interesting problems as well.
Right.
Okay, Mr.
Well,
Pope,
yeah, with trying to get them having, is it called anonymity? If they, yes,
there would be that idea of giving people, absolving people from their oaths and things. But the fact that's fine with individuals. But I think the problem would, even if it's a problem of perception, the perception would be that government has just lied and lied and lied about this, and I think it would fundamentally undermine people's trust in government and in the federal authorities. Now, you might say that trust's pretty low anyway, but that's another story.
Well, like you mentioned earlier, they may not know themselves, just as well as they're with us, with the rest of everyone else, So it means that they wouldn't be lying. I have a question for you, and this was mentioned. Correct me if I'm wrong here. You were interviewed on BBC News in 2008, and you mentioned that you'd never seen a UFO. Does that still stand, or has that changed? That
still stands. I've never seen one. I've investigated, I suppose, officially and subsequently in a personal capacity, thousands of other people's sightings and experiences, but never had one myself.
Huh. Okay. Do you want to?
Yes, absolutely. I'd love to see one. I mean,
I'll give him a call and I'll tell him to swing by. Okay. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a sight, and I mean, it depends on. Yeah. But
I think. Yeah, and I think when I say I would love to see a UFO, I don't mean obviously just a light in the sky. I mean a sort of up close and personal, obvious structured craft doing something that we just couldn't do. And obviously I've spoken to many people who've had those sorts of close encounters, and I'm quite envious. I'd love to see something like that.
Well, I should tell you about my sighting sometime, because it was multiple witnesses, very up close, within 300, maybe 500 feet tops away, and missing time and all sorts of, I have a video on my YouTube thing, but I just recently got some hypnosis to try to regain some of that missing time, but there were some credible people that saw it, like, the city mayor and half the town, and, so it should have went in the archives there, but it didn't happen in the UK, so, but anyways, wow, we only have, 6 minutes left. I'm going to let you guys wrap it up. I am so glad that you came on, Mr. Pope. I'm thrilled. And if you would like to say, we've been posting periodically your website, is it nickpope.net, and the part where you can get your books, it would be still on the website with /books, .htm, and is there any other links or projects that you want to tell the listeners about?
Well, I think there's two that I'd mention very briefly. Firstly, I speak obviously at quite a lot of conferences all around the world. The one coming up just really in 2 weeks' time, less than 2 weeks' time now, of course, is the big UFO Congress in Phoenix, Arizona. So I would urge anyone who hasn't taken a look at that to do so. There are going to be some very big names in the field there. People like Charles Holt, of course, the famous witness from the Bentwaters case. Leslie Kean, whose book on UFOs is so important. So that's going to be something, and I'll be there. So I'll hope to see some of the listeners to this show at Phoenix. The other thing is UFO Matrix magazine, which I write for, and again you can subscribe online to that. But it's a hard copy magazine, so subscribe online and they'll mail one out to you, and that's a very good magazine.
Okay.
I'll definitely check it out. Definitely. Well, we advocate disclosure and just networking and just trying to get everybody to be a part of the galactic family, so to speak. And this is just another piece of the puzzle, and it's been an honor. So I thank you so much, sir. And I'll let Nate take us out, say the rest, and I'll kind of bow out right now.
Yes, I personally have to tell you thank you as well. Thank you very much. It's been a real privilege. Okay, everyone.
Well, no, thank you. I've enjoyed being on the show. Thank you.
You're welcome back.
Yeah, anytime. Okay, that is former Ministry of Defense in Britain, Nick Pope. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Have a wonderful week. And I'd like to wrap this up with saying, keep your eyes to the skies, keep an open mind, and look up.